Welcome to ProjectME, the podcast. I'm your host, Tiffany Carter, the founder of ProjectME, multimillionaire entrepreneur, former TV newscaster, money-making expert, female empowerment speaker, and self-proclaimed office supply addict. My mission is to take the mystery out of making big money. Every week on ProjectME, the podcast, I'll share success tips, strategies, and stories from other entrepreneurs, experts, and millionaires, showing you exactly how you can achieve your most exceptional life. Now let's get to it. You are listening to ProjectME with Tiffany Carter, the podcast. I'm so happy to bring on our guest today, Dr. Erin Haskell, creator and host of the TV show Good Morning LaLa Land, best-selling author, mom, and transformational speaker. I am so thrilled to have you on, just so you guys can have, an understanding, because I always hand select all my guests. Dr. Erin has created the first ever super popular live streaming TV show that is all about positive, inspiring, and empowering news. And since you guys know my background as a journalist and it's filled with negativity, I couldn't wait to bring her on and to share how all this came about. So welcome, Dr. Erin. Thanks for coming on our show.
Thank you so much for having me, Tiffany. I believe that this is the greatest time in history because we now have, free range of the internet and we get to create what we want to create. And the reality is that bad news, if you will always be around because entanglement, people get addicted to entanglement. So they will always like drama. They will always like bad news. They will always like junk food. And that is where discipline will always persevere. And so we're in a time in history where we're going to be challenged and tested at levels that we've never been tested before. So it's an honor to be here. Love your work and so proud of everything you're up to.
Thank you. So tell us a little bit about how you came to say to yourself, we need to create this show, and to the point where there had to have been a deep yearning and passion behind it, divine intervention, so to speak, because it's a lot of dang work to create a show.
Yeah. I was meditating, praying every day, saying, please let me be used for the highest good. And knowing that a lot of times we will goal set, we get our vision boards out and we put this cute little picture of all the material stuff that we want, the little life, the little relationship, and maybe there is a talk show on there, whatever it may be, but we come to realize that something is missing. And so I would go into meditation and prayer and I would ask my higher self to bring the vision to me. And Spirit said there was a show, and I was not in the industry. I knew nothing. I didn't know where that was going to come about. But what I do know is that when Spirit speaks, you just keep your eyes and heart open and take inspired action. And so I just was on someone else's show in Focus TV Network and stumbled into creating my own show. So it was a divine appointment.
Now, for my listeners who maybe aren't as far along in the process of understanding even what higher self means or what it means to really get reconnected with Spirit and follow that guidance, right? That might be a few steps ahead of where some people are at. Can you give a basic version of what that really looks like to people, like kind of demystify it?
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to call it source. You don't have to call it God. You can call it whatever. You can call it just your authentic gut. You know what I mean? I mean, it's that with inside of you that knows when you're doing right, knows when you're off course, knows when you're living from a true authentic purpose and when you're living from trying to keep with the Jones and your identity crap.
What are some signs that people can look for within themselves if they're following an aligned path or if they're kind of veering off course?
Yeah, we had that topic today on the show. We actually asked our guests, when do you know when you're manifesting from ego versus when do you know you're manifesting from an authentic space? And I think it's an interesting thing because it's a real fine line sometimes, right? For me, I can tell when I start getting insecure that it's coming from an egoic space. And we had to make that distinction also. The ego doesn't mean like I'm egoic, like I'm so cool. Ego means anytime I feel like I'm separate or divided. And so I know I'm not creating from an authentic space when I'm looking at how many followers I'm getting, or when I'm, trying to compare myself with somebody else or whatever that is, because it's just not coming from a space of a pure creativity and knowing that it's going to be received by exactly the right audience.
Yeah, what I say to people is if it doesn't feel good, something's off. It's supposed to feel good. It might be scary, but it's supposed to still feel good. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think there's a point of power. There's a point where you're taking a quantum leap and it should get really uncomfortable because you're going outside your comfort zone, and yet you're excited at the same time. So yeah, there's like this perfect little place that you want to live in a lot of the time.
So when people that you come across and that I know you've done a lot of one-on-one work with people and workshops and so forth that are really lost, and they say, I don't know what my passion is. They've just put one foot in front of the other and have been in like survival mode most of their life. No fault of theirs, right? They were maybe taught that by their parents or whatnot. What kind of questions do you ask people to kind of get them to hone in on maybe what their purpose is here?
Sure. There's kind of two processes. There's an actual formula I use for that because it's one of the most common things that people are trying to figure out. What's my purpose and calling, right? So there's kind of two things. There's a formula, and it's basically what is the hardest thing you've ever gone through, your biggest tribulation, if you will, and what are your skills and what are your passions. So when you put those three together, you can transform it into your purpose and calling. So for example, the hardest thing I ever went through was having a stillborn son at 22 years old and giving birth to his body and feeling like, how could life be so cruel? And in that, I realized that what I really had gone through and what I'd overcome was suffering, was feeling like helpless in this life. So it became my calling to help others, realize that that they're powerful, almighty spiritual beings. And, for somebody out there that's not spiritual, fine, drop those words. It may be, for example, I had a little girl I was working with, and she had, her parents were divorced, and she was so sad about that. And she also loved the passion of making dresses. And so what she realized that as she was making these dresses, that her entire brand was going to be around helping a young woman find her own personal beauty and strength within how she expressed herself in the world, and helping, young kids overcome that feeling of abandonment from their parents getting divorced. So it doesn't matter what your trials or tribulations is, but if you put your trials and tribulations plus your passions plus your skill set, that equals your purpose and calling. And so for some people, they say, well, I haven't overcome that trial. I may still be going through that. Maybe they haven't felt like they've come full spectrum and had triumph over that. So I go, well, great. Then the course is really to just follow what you're interested in. So maybe that's following a bliss, following a hobby, whatever that is, and knowing that in that, as you embody that hobby or whatever, say somebody likes, doing beading, and, they make beads and they go to the hobby store and they create beads. Eventually, if they study the stones and they go to the workshops and they go to the things, all of a sudden they're going to become an expert in the realm of making beads. And all of a sudden they have their purpose and calling, because it helps them express and helps people, have intentions around their life with their beads. I don't know what that is, right?
I often get asked, my background comes from, I have a childhood that's filled with severe sexual abuse, and I was also raped at 15, and in complete denial of all of it until I was about 22, 23, when I was on the news and I was literally being seen by people. I wanted to hide. I didn't know why. And people will say, like, what's your why? That's like a big trending phrase. And
right.
And, you say it so much more eloquently, but it's, I want to empower people to live their best life, regardless of what's happened to them. They can go to the other side and use that to regain their power that they lost from maybe an abusive spouse or abusive upbringing or whatever it is. We can get our power back. So you say it so well, but for those of you guys who are listening, if you were bullied, take that and use Dr. Erin's method on you were bullied. Like imagine maybe your purpose is to help people regain their self-esteem and their self-worth from having that happen, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that if people really understood how supportive the universe is, they would realize at some level we really do draw in everything into our lives. So even that awful thing of thinking that we're a victim of X, Y, and Z. I too was raped in high school. And, it seems, we don't want that to happen, right? But it's almost like a soul agreement that we say we're willing to take on this for all of us, not just for us, but for all of us to know we want to go through that experience. And therefore we want to take on, like a contract of where we're going to serve for our one community, because we're all connected. They've proven it scientifically. We are not disconnected. We are energetically one, and we are completely impacted by the people around us, not only in our inner circle, but in our collective consciousness, our race consciousness, and all the above. So it's like a soul contract, And so
I love that.
It is a blessing in a weird, twisted, sick way, right?
I say that many times is, yes, I don't wish this upon anyone, but it was supposed to happen to me for the greater good, like you've said. Mm-hmm. So did you go into getting your doctorate and everything after your traumatic and experience with your stillborn? Or was this a path you were already on prior to then?
God, no, I didn't even know if you had told me I'd be a doctor of divinity or a minister or any of that stuff when I was in my 20s, I would have laughed and said, you're completely insane. Like if I went to a psychic and they said that, I'd be like, this woman does not know anything, No, I did not plan on doing any of this. I basically just started seeking my own healing and trying to figure out what was going on, because the day after I gave birth to my stillborn son, I went back to the mortician's house and I had this moment. I was in this dark room down in the basement and I just realized that he was gone. His body was still here. And I made a huge agreement in that moment. I was like, I don't care what I do in this lifetime, but I've got to figure out why we're here and what this is all about. And so for me, it was not thinking about a career. I was just literally obsessed with the work. Like I just went through every possible modality, process, every book under the sun, meditated every chance I could get. Like I just was determined to figure it out. I didn't get my doctorate till years and years later. I mean, this was, I'm going to date myself, but this was 24 years ago now since I had my stillborn. So yeah.
What did you do in terms of that money piece? Okay, a big thing I talk about a lot is, money mindset, millionaire mindset, and I don't talk about it lightly. It can really derail us from following our purpose because that currency of money can cloud our vision, can cloud even our drive and our motivation. What did you do during all that time of all your, your studying and preparing, right? Preparing for all this greatness that you have right now. Yeah. What did you do to manage that mindset? Because I'm sure the money didn't come first, right?
Well, I was dumb enough and fortunate enough to not think that I was going to be doing spiritual work for a living. So I actually bought and fixed up little tiny, like literally crack homes. I go and rehab old homes that were like $70,000 and things like that. And I would just buy and fix them up. And I worked my ass off and I would do that. And then on all my free time, I would do all my spiritual work. And slowly I was able to build assets. And then I was able to have the luxury of having some time to put into, I became financially independent and I put my 24/7 into my spiritual work. And then it began to become a business. But I do think that for those people that are out there that are looking to do something that is very creative and they can't quite figure out how do I monetize this, because it doesn't always go hand in hand. And I think that we need to distinguish that there's two different things going on here. money and transactions are different than building, say, a brand or just creatively expressing. And so oftentimes with clients, there's four legs that we deal with in people's lives. We deal with, of course, their health, their relationships, their money and career, and their creative expression. And so we like to put those separate because they don't necessarily need to be one. And I think it frees people up because sometimes we know that if we do what's called outlining, we try and control and make things happen how we want them to happen. It doesn't usually end very well. So we need to make sure that we stay open because oftentimes the universe wants to bring us money in different ways. We don't necessarily need money to go through our hands to have abundance. It may come from, loved ones. It may come from, I don't know, different gifts. It may come from asset building. It may come from whatever, instead of thinking and having blinders on to think it needs to come from just my online business. Maybe your online business you do 50% of the time, and maybe you do something else 50% of the time. And as you build up, you can make that transition. I think anything's possible. So I think, of course, people can make it happen in that one way, but I think that people need to stay open.
Yes. And, I like to teach, don't put all your eggs in one basket when it comes to, even mentally, when it comes to money, right? And it doesn't have to come from selling the widget or from selling a course or from public speaking. I get that that's maybe what you desire for yourself or what you envision for yourself. But does it really matter? I mean, I have things on my vision board that have come to fruition in ways that I would have never predicted. So that's what you mean by be open to how it can come about.
It's called outlining. So if you try and figure out how, then we're not supposed to figure out how. We're supposed to figure out who do we need to become and embody to make that, right? So if you're not getting paid for public speaking, it's because you're not worth somebody paying for public speaking yet. Let's just get it straight. So, do what you need to do to make the money. In the meantime, develop your public speaking. That may be speaking for free at every single possible event you can get your hands on, and developing yourself enough to where you impact people when you step onto that stage, and they're like, holy cow, I got to refer this person, and you will start getting paid.
What do you go back to, given, I very much understand the costs involved, the time, the energy, and having, you have a 5-day-a-week, TV episode. Granted, you're not on, an actual network, so to speak, but still it's very expensive. It's very labor intensive. It can be tiring. What do you do mindset wise when it's just, one of those days where you're like, this is more expensive than I even thought it was going to be?
This is a prime example of what we just talked about. I don't pay a dime for the show. That show was landed into my lap because when you truly embody a vision of what is for the highest good, and when you embody the wisdom of being an expert in the realm of whatever, and you have the leadership skills to bring people onto the show, and you have all those skills, I don't pay a dime for that show. Andy Waldman is an angel. It's his passion project, Focus TV Network. And it's a win-win because he's building up his network and I'm building up Good Morning LaLa. We're building up Good Morning LaLa. So it's a win-win. And, yes, it costs you time. It costs you effort. And yes, there are expenses as far as, things, but it's a prime example of no. So imagine how much. So you can say, oh, I want to make X amount of income, but you got to start opening your eyes and going, how much am I making by even just not paying for that show? What that would cost? What? I mean, I don't know, a couple $100,000 minimum to produce every year and have a retail space and have all the stuff. Easily. So, if you're out there and you're wondering, where the flow is, first of all, you got to first get in the attitude of gratitude. Like you have to first open your eyes and realize how much is given to you, how much abundance you do have. And maybe there's somebody out there that just can't put food on the table. But I remember those days. I remember when I could only buy Top Ramen when I had a young son. And I remember those days. But that's when you have to persevere. That's when you have to live in faith and know that it's going to happen because you put enough time, enough effort, and you keep believing and you keep you keep growing and educating yourself and meditating and doing all the work that you know you need to do. It's just a matter of time. And, things come into your life. It doesn't mean someone's going to write you a check or they're going to give you the credit card. Abundance comes in all different ways.
And you bring up another thing, time. I get a lot, Tiffany, why hasn't this happened for me yet? When is this going to happen? A lot of time. So the how also has to be, we have to let go of the how, but would you also agree with the when? We have to let go of when?
Well, there's what's called the law of growth. So some things take time because people go, well, if it's true and you can manifest and all things are possible, then I should be able to manifest something instantaneously. Yes, that is true. All prayers are already answered. That's the truth. Okay. But there's a law of growth. So for example, say somebody wants to be a dancer, right? They can dance, but to be, of course, a professional dancer, you've got to develop the muscles. You've got to develop the rudiments. You've got to develop the muscle memory. You've got to develop all these things. And that takes time. And that is just simply, if you think about the universal terms, we have a cause and effect. We see our consciousness in form. And so this is how we understand how our consciousness is working by the time and space spectrum. So we want to have that time that it takes to develop those things so that we can see how we're manifesting.
And truly, if any of us take a moment and really look back in our lives, even things that we deemed as bad, the timing really was always perfect. That thing had to happen for the next really good thing to happen, at least in my experience.
We call it the mental equivalent. So everything in your life is the mental equivalent. But people go, well, how did I create, the traffic on the street? Well, you have to remember that your consciousness is not just an individual consciousness. Your consciousness is collective consciousness as well, and cosmic consciousness. So every single thing going on, every drop of what's going on is the mental equivalent of what's going on in consciousness.
I love that. I want to make sure I ask you about your best-selling book because I'm really curious, and I'm going to read the title because it's kind of long. It's the 40-Day Guide to Unleashing Your Spiritual Power, Your Spiritual Powers, Life's Purpose, and Manifesting Your Dreams. I'm curious, why 40 days?
I debated it, because people love the 30-day challenges, but 40 days is it's biblical. It is spiritual. It's planetary, and it's just a spiritual number, and for discipline, and I wanted to attract people that aren't necessarily interested in traditional religion, but that are clearly have the intention of understanding this is a spiritual thing we got going on here.
Would you say that your book is good for people who are just starting to become more conscious or have a curiosity about thinking differently and going a little deeper?
Oh yeah, it's a fun book. It's, I've gotten great feedback from a lot of women that are just beginning down the journey of awakening and transformation. And, there's some fun little stories. There's a lot of science in it as well. So I think for me, I didn't intend on writing the book. What happened was I had just taken notes of my own journey and distinctions and whatever. And I was going through my doctorate and I thought, I want to be able to give a book to, if I was going to deliver one gift to that little girl that was 22 in that dark room, what would I give her? What would I say? This is how this whole thing works, And so I wanted to put a book together that summed up, from somebody who had zero spiritual, acknowledgement, that they just could read it and go, oh my gosh. So like the first day is just about serendipity and how profound serendipity is. But there's also a word called zemblanity, which is all about kind of negative serendipity. And so how really it's all a coincidence of consciousness, and how someone can begin to awaken to realize that the good moments when you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened. I got that job in San Francisco and I always wanted to have a job in San Francisco, right? How that is just as the same as the serendipity of the zemblanity of getting fired, it is all one thing going on. And when you start awakening to going, wow, what's really going on in the belief system in my soul, then you can start going, wow, if I can create crap, I can, use that for harmony and for good.
When you see and meet with people, and I'm sure you can also energetically sense it too, is my guess, but people who are stuck and they are trying everything and they're pushing and they're working 12 hours a day and nothing seems to be working and they're getting more and more frustrated. What kind of, advice or tips or wisdom do you have for them?
Simple. You have to understand the universal law and how you inform universal law. So we inform universal law from our vibration, our feelings within our subconscious mind. So if we're feeling angst and all that stuff, it just says, and so it is. So you inform it with that angst, that frustration, that whatever, and you're basically informing it with the subjective mind, which is connected with universal law, and you're going to get more frustration. You're just going to manifest crap. So like you got to, as they say, fear thy Lord, fear thy law. Like, yeah, like if you knew how profound your feelings were, like you would be turning up that music, dancing around and going, screw it, because that's when things happen, right? It's when we get in that flow and we're like jovial and having a great time and not caring that everything lands in our lap. So if you're frustrated, you're just stressed, you're trying to figure it out, oh man, you got to let that one go, because you're just going to get more of just not good stuff.
It's like that line that people say, oh, bad news comes in threes. Yeah, I bet it does.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so does good signs, right?
Right. True. I mean, I'm sure most of you guys listening can relate when you're having a good day, or maybe when you just started falling in love with someone, like the trees are prettier and your food tastes better. And there's, this is exactly what she's talking about, just in a more, I guess you could say, sophisticated, science-based language, right?
Yeah, we go into a lot of the different scientific backing around consciousness and things like that, but not too heavy, just enough to make it, make our point for sure.
Well, thank you so much for coming on and enlightening all of us and myself. And you are doing something so dear to my heart. And I truly didn't know that it wasn't, so to speak, costing you anything monetarily. And that just goes to show, like, the world really needs what you have, and you're doing beautiful things.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And, I know that your listeners, and what I found is people that are doing podcasts and different things, their viewership comes back because of them, not because of their guests necessarily. And so I do think it's so important. I want to hear more of your story and more of everything. I'm so excited to come to your event. And I don't know if you'll be posting this before or after that or what, but I think it's important to just talk more of everything you've got going on here for sure, because they've come for you. You're what drew them here.
I do feel like I energetically attract the right people to get to the point of the story. You know how you said, we'll end with this, but how you said you wrote the book for the 22-year-old girl in the dark room, I really get that. I know what my end purpose is, but I'm also aware that there's steps that it takes to get there. And I think that's so important for all of us to think about, whether you're someone who refurbishes cars or homes, or you're a writer or you're a photographer, go back to that pain point on who it is you're doing this for. And I really think you're going to find something special happens.
For sure. So well said, and so proud of everything you're up to. And what, it's hard to walk away from what, you walked away from, and the glitz and the glamour is hard to let go of because you don't know what's on the other side. So I'm just excited for your journey and everything you're doing, and looking forward to collaborating. And there's just so many incredible women's groups and different things going on. It's such a great time in history, and everything's being disrupted right now. No one knows where it's going exactly. And I truly believe that right now, get in the game. If you're out there, you're listening to this, it doesn't matter where it's going. Don't try and figure it out. Just get in the flow. Energy and the life is an exchange of energy. And so the more you can just begin to flow with people, get in relationship, get in collaboration, help promote other people's things, then the universe will open up. It'll open up and tell you exactly where you're supposed to go.
Well, we'll end on that because that was so well said. Thanks again for coming on, and I'll be seeing you soon.
Okay. Thank you.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please write a 5-star review on iTunes. Not only will this make me super happy, but it will allow more listeners to find our special show. Simply help me help others.